In order to make a relationship work, both people need to have the idea of the same type of structure. Love is unconditional, but a relationship has conditions.
This is for every man who's been told to man up and every woman wondering why he shut down.
He's a clinical psychologist as well as coach to Oscar winners and CEOs around the world.
No matter what challenge you face, you can begin to find a growth.
Today's guest is Dr. Aria.
We're here with our guest speaker, Dr. Aria.
Dr. Aria, thank you so much. Dr. Aria, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
This episode explores what it truly means to live authentically, heal from deep relational wounds, and redefine masculinity and resilience in the modern world.
If it's something that feels deeply aligned and attuned to who you are and the values that you have and the life that you want to create, then it's something to be explored.
Aria, it's so good to have you on the show. Been wanting to get you on the show for such a long time. I've been so impressed with your progress in the world of self-development and psychology. And great to have you on the show. What would you say best describes you and what you do?
Thank you for having me, Sean. It's always a pleasure. I'm a clinical psychologist and I specialize in resilience and high performance. And so I work with individuals who are often at the top of their game professionally, but then they're stuck or struggling with an aspect of their life.
Like me.
Well, you're just excelling in multiple ways. The point is to get to where you are. So I often have you as a template for people where essentially you're aware of the fears, the insecurities, the doubt, and the stress that you're experiencing, and you're moving to a place of greater self-awareness and self-understanding so you can build a more resilient mindset and essentially optimize and be the best in different aspects of your life.
And what's interesting, of course, is that you trained in more traditional science and then sort of mixed that with mindfulness and came into this field. Your father was a doctor, a medical doctor, is that right? You didn't want to go into the medical realm?
I started in medicine and realized very early on that whilst it was an idea that seemed admirable, and I think from my parents' perspective is a secure career, it's respectable, deep down there's this gnawing sense that it wasn't aligned with my path and my journey. And so I had that tension, that conflict in the first couple of years until my dad got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and had a poor prognosis, but he's still here today. And I took time out from medicine and then realized I was, one, deeply unhappy for a number of reasons, and two, that wasn't part of my path. So I took the more scenic route to then find psychology, which I love, the human mind, why we think the way that we do, the actions that we take, the forces that govern both.
I was thinking about, before this podcast, I was thinking about like how long I've known you. Of course, I've known you. We actually both went to the same university.
You did.
In Edinburgh. And you're Scottish, Persian, Iranian Scottish.
Yeah.
I'm Chinese, British Chinese. So we're both like third culture kids.
Yeah.
How does your mixed culture upbringing sort of affect the way that you see the world or practice as a psychologist?
I love having the mix. I used to have a dog called Alfie. I remember I took him to the vet and he was half lab, half Cocker Spaniel. And the vet said, he's got hybrid vigor. And I was like, hybrid vigor? That's what I've got. So I think there's
I think you got a lot more hybrid vigor than I do. I didn't fall out of the hybrid vigor tree.
Hybrid vigor is reflected in different ways. So but I think from the Persian heritage, there's so much focus on family and love, connection, community, and tracing back Persian roots to philosophy, poetry, mathematics, and the Scottish side I like it has again very heart led. And there's like a roughness and an edge and a playfulness too. So,
I mean, just following up on that thread for a bit, because I often think about, we just take it for granted having mixed race parents, but like to have an Iranian father in Scotland meeting a Scottish woman, it's quite unusual in those days.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, was Scotland a sort of accepting environment for that kind of?
Well, I've got huge respect for my father. He moved to London whenever he was 19. So he went to an American university in Baghdad. He's Iranian, but he grew up in Iraq. And he studied medicine from when he was 16, finished his studies, and then did his clinical placements at King's in London and loved it here. And then did a PhD in Dundee, moved to Glasgow, was teaching there. And then that's when he met my mum, who was a fifth-year medical student. He was a doctor. Back in that day, that was allowed.
That's not allowed anymore.
Well, I should probably check first. And I think the Scots were very welcoming.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a different time back then. I think there was also, even within hospitals, there's discrimination. But he was an incredible force where he always led into what he believed was true, and values, integrity were incredibly important to him. And he always passed that down to us. You know, you can lose anything. You can lose your partner, your house, your money, even to an extent your status, depending on how you're viewed, but no one can ever take away from you who you are and what you stand for and the approach that you take.
And you yourself never faced any discrimination?
I did at school a little bit, yeah. In terms of being an Arab, even though Iranians aren't Arabs, and being sent back to my country, even though I was born in Glasgow, I found slightly confusing. But I think the bullying was partly related to that. And then I was severely bullied at one point, and I could never really identify why, but I think it was being slightly different. So I always felt slightly on the outside. I wasn't fully Scottish, but then I wasn't fully Iranian. So where did I fall?
No, I kind of resonate with that. Never really feel part of the group, but that also gives us our unique perspective, I think.
I think it's definitely shaped the way that I've grown, because I reached this point where I came to the, for me, freeing perspective that you don't need anyone or you don't need anything. And actually, if you focus on cultivating an independent and robust sense of self that's increasingly unaffected on a core level by what's happening around you, then no matter what storm you face, you can begin to find the calm. No matter what challenge you face, you can begin to find the growth.
Generally speaking, would you say you had a happy upbringing, a childhood? Because you're in this field of sort of positive psychology.
Yeah.
And it's you kind of taking that as your sort of, your drive to inform other people, show them how to live a happier, more fulfilling life.
I had a very privileged, very abundantly loving upbringing with mum and dad. Had an older brother who was very protective, very strong, always wanted to toughen me up.
Of course, I knew your older brother extremely well, one of my best friends.
Yes. And at the same time, what I find is that no matter what experiences you've had, even if they were on the surface, loving and caring and with a lot of provision, each of us will go through our own journey. And so I went through this journey where I felt like I didn't have a voice, or at least my voice wasn't important, and that I should stay quiet, and that it's too dangerous to share what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. And so I learned to listen, and that shaped my path as well. It was safer for me to ask questions and listen than it would to put myself out there.
And just looking at some of your work and your previous podcasts and your Instagram, I would say what makes you unique is your sense of vulnerability and being able to really go deep and listen to people. I think that's one of your sort of core superpowers. But you've been through quite a lot recently as well. Like, I know you talk a lot about your first marriage, and how that broke down. You talk about why the little things in love, don't sweat the small stuff. We're often told don't sweat the small stuff, but actually you're saying that the small stuff is actually very important for relationships. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Completely. the way that I approach life is that it's a journey, and essentially it's a spiritual quest to return us to a place of truth. And that place of truth is who we truly are, because as we grow up, we have conditioning and we form an identity in the mind. The egoic mind creates an identity of who we are and who you are. And I'm often defined in opposition to you and how we relate to the world. But through creating this identity, we take on beliefs that are falsehoods. We create this external structure to try and differentiate, but also protect ourselves. And life will take you on a journey where that is challenged, and the constructs that you've created unravel. And life will find a way to dismantle it and to bring you to a place where you then have to look within and question, truly, what is my true self? What does it mean to live freely and authentically? What is creating a life that I love? And one of the paths that life took me on was through my marriage, through my relationship, where, was 25, met this wonderful girl. She was 19, and we were together for 10 years. And over the course of, what was a wonderful relationship in many ways, I began to lose myself. So I began to place her at my center, which means I was no longer at my center. And I was trying to be the person I thought she would want me to be. And so I began to change, and I began to lose my essence. And so I didn't have boundaries. And so along that way, if you don't have boundaries, I've stepped away from my masculinity. I became almost like quite a bland version of who I am now. Of course, the attraction was impacted, that was lost. But also I didn't speak, I didn't share what was true for me. If there was a frustration or a hurt or something that didn't feel right, I didn't share it. And I thought that was keeping the peace. I thought that was protecting the relationship, but it wasn't. And so we found ourselves in this context out of which she acted, where she had an affair and she became pregnant with this man's child, which of course was this devastating collapse of my world at the time in terms of 10 years and the relationship we'd built, our family home, our dog, her family, who was like my family, and everything we'd created. And it changed in an instant. And that forced me to look at not her actions, because we are never responsible for what someone else does. And it's not about condoning or excusing or approving actions like that, but it is being honest with ourselves, and it is looking at, okay, we created a context. What part did I play into that context out of which she acted? Because if I go through it unaware and without growth, I'll potentially recreate the same circumstances in 10 years' time.
So you take co-responsibility for that, what the outcome was? Is that what you're saying? You take responsibility as part of the relationship?
I say I take full responsibility for my actions in the relationship, and my actions will have co-contributed to the context.
Are you on good terms with her at this point?
I'll put it two ways. Internally, yes, in that I feel very grateful and blessed to have really gone on a journey of internal exploration where I've reached a sense of peace and forgiveness for her, for him, for myself. Whenever I hold her in mind, I feel nothing but love. Like I can send her love right now. We don't communicate because after she revealed what had happened, I know that for her path, she had to focus on herself, her new family, her new child, and having contact wouldn't have been helpful. So we haven't spoken.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is, relationships in the modern day world are fraught with dangers and difficulties, online dating and, so many temptations. We're blasted with advertising every day that's very sexualized, hypersexualized music, hypersexualized advertising. We live in a hypersexualized society. What advice would you give to, young couples these days to try and navigate the current landscape of dating and finding a partner?
In terms of finding a partner?
I mean, online dating apps were the rage a few years ago. Now everyone's saying no one's using online dating apps. It's all about in real person. It seems to be very confusing for a lot of people.
The two parts that hit me with your question, one would be to try and connect intuitively to what feels right and natural for you. So, for instance, some people really gravitate towards online dating, and it's a space that they feel, comfortable in, or even if they're outside of the comfort zone, it still feels right for them. I know that whenever I was single, I took some time, a number of years to heal, and then when I was going back into dating, my friends were saying, online dating, I was terrible.
It's really
terrible, Sean. It just didn't connect with me or resonate with me. Any charisma or humor or attractive force I had dissipated and deleted itself as soon as I went online. So, often you'd have to message, and some of them, the man would message first, and I'd be like, hey. And then a little prompt would come up and be like, remember, never start a conversation with hi or hello. And I was like, oh, fuck, okay. I'm like, ask you a question. So I'd be like, how are you doing? And I'd be like, remember, never start with any boring questions like, how are you today? And I was like, oh my goodness, come up with a more interesting, engaging question. I was like, would you rather be killed by a bear or an avalanche? And I didn't get any replies. So I think it's about finding where you feel comfortable. So I know that for me, very quickly, even though I'm aware of the data, you're far more likely to have much more exposure. It's led to a lot of matches. A lot of my friends have been matched that way. But for me, I was like, I want to go old school. So I felt more comfortable walking up to someone in a supermarket. And
was it a supermarket? Which one?
Well, park supermarkets. No, but the way that I met my partner, who I'm deeply in love with, was actually through mutual friends. They both knew us. We didn't know each other. And I think that's a brilliant way. What I'd really encourage is speak to the people around you who love you, who know you, who care for you, and say, listen, look out for me. If there's someone that you know, if you have an idea, then share it, put on a dinner. I think if we all helped each other a little bit more, then that would definitely be a way through. And the second part I'd say is, before you begin to look for the partner that, well, one, you could define the type of partner that you'd love to have, and all the positive qualities that you'd love. I think that's important to have a vision. But then you also need to look at, are you the kind of person who will attract that kind of person? Because often we're looking for this beautiful, angelic, or heroic knight, but there are a lot of places where we have room to grow and evolve. And so it's being honest with ourselves and reaching a place. I'd say the biggest piece of advice would be reaching a place where you understand your insecurities, because we all have them. You understand your fears, and you're actively working on them. You know what is your part and what is their part. You know what you're bringing into the relationship, and knowing what doesn't work for you. As important as it is to know what works for you, it's to know what doesn't work, what your boundaries are, what your expectations are, what your vision is for the relationship, and being able to be happy on your own. Because once you're in that place, there's not need and there's no attachment, and so you're free. But until that time, if you're looking for a relationship to complete you or fulfill you, then I think you're on dangerous ground.
You talked a little bit about, who you really are. And there's a lot of talk in the new age about we don't know who we really are. Who do you think you really are? And how does one find out who they really are? Because you see it again and again on Instagram or Alan Watts or Ram Dass. Yeah. I mean, I have an idea who that is, but who do you think that's referring to?
So we're going deep.
We're going deep, straight in.
The way that I view it is that we have the false self, or the egoic self, or the identity that our mind's created. So that would be, in this case, I am Aria. I am a psychologist. I'm 41. and this is what I can do and this is what I can't do. That's an idea that has been constructed by the mind. Then there's the true self, which is essentially consciousness. It's a field of consciousness. So you've got the mind which creates its contents, and then you've got the awareness of what the mind has created. So I can have a thought, Sean, you are a very sexy man.
I mean, not on the podcast area, but thank you.
And I can see, I can be aware of the thought.
Yeah.
Now, the I is the awareness. So it's aware of the thought, but the I is not the thought. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, but it's the opposite way around. I am, and then the mind will think. And so this is getting into esoteric territory, but essentially, from my perspective, you can only say what you are not. You can only strip away. As soon as you say, I am this, I am a psychologist. Well, if I lose my accreditation and I began working as a lawyer, then my profession has changed, but my core essential self has not changed, even if it's Christian or Buddhism or Buddhist. So the identity can change, but the true self, the consciousness, is just a field of consciousness, which can never be captured in words. And that is very freeing, because with consciousness, there's always pure potentiality. So it's even letting go of, I've now let go of a lot of ideas of who I am. All I can say is I am.
You might refer to that stream of consciousness as the unified field. Some people talk about it as the divine, the prime creator, perhaps. What do you think? Is it the divine for you? And are you religious still?
I would say we'll put labels on it to understand it. They're signifiers. For me, it's the divine, God, love, consciousness. That is all at the core. And the way that I understand it mentally and conceptually, I like this analogy that I'm the sky over Glasgow. You could be the sky over Hong Kong. Now we've got our own cloud and climate system, but essentially it's all sky. It's all connected at that level, and that's the way that I view all of us. We're all skies over different areas, but we're all still sky.
Yeah, but the cloud over the sky over Glasgow is just full of rain and cloud and grey.
Yeah.
The ones in Hong Kong are blue and fluffy.
The accidents of birth, you got lucky, Sharon. We don't all start from the same place.
That starts from the same place. But that's a beautiful analogy about the sky, and that it's all connected above the clouds. Yeah. Going back to just this idea that, so coming back to what you said, don't lose your center when you're in a relationship. We hear so many stories of people losing themselves in relationships, and if you are in a difficult relationship, how do you suggest that people resolve this, the conflict, like for married couples and so forth? Like, what is the sort of, for people who can't resolve their issues, do they go back to this, like, I'm okay by myself? Or how does that, where's the pull and push of that? Let me rephrase that, wasn't well put. So you just mentioned that we just dove into this idea that we are, infinite source behind the ego. How does that play into relationships? Because, of course, if we all understand that we are divine, infinite beings, we don't need anyone else, potentially. So how does that figure into your understanding?
One part would be there is love and there is a relationship. So if love is source, is consciousness, love is unconditional.
Yeah.
A relationship, though, has conditions. So whenever I enter a relationship, there are certain criteria that it's predicated upon. One condition would be that in my relationship, it's monogamous and we are faithful to each other, and that is exemplified in different ways, from the physical to the emotional. So love is unconditional, but a relationship has conditions. In order to make a relationship work, both people need to have the idea of the same type of structure. And we need to find our way through those times whenever the relationship is being challenged. The very fabric of the relationship is suffering because the conditions that you have are either not being met, or they're being transgressed, or they're being overlooked, and vice versa for you and your partner. So I used to have this belief that because my feelings are my responsibility, which I still stand by, I used to think that meant I had to deal with them on my own. But what I've come to realize is that relational hurt requires relational repair. It's only through the relationship often that we can reach that sense of reconciliation and reconnection and rebuilding in the same direction. So it involves always at its core being as open and honest as we can. The parts that we often maybe share with someone else or don't share with anyone because we're afraid of either hurting the other person or being judged or being abandoned, those are the parts often that we need to share.
Because a lot of the time you think, I don't want to tell my partner because it might offend them, it might hurt them.
Completely.
You talk about this, that those little micro moments or feelings will compound.
Completely. And that's what happened in my marriage. There were all these little moments, and I thought I was letting go of the feeling, but frustration or hurt, unless it's been relationally, released and repaired, it just hardens into resentment and it begins to build, and that will block the connection between the two of you until one day you can wake up and there's just no sense of connection, and you even forget why, or forget the feeling of connection that you had before. And that's, one of the hardest parts. So to go back to your question, I think it involves radical honesty with yourself and with your partner. And of course, there's a whole other question of how do you communicate, but definitely being as open and honest with yourself and your partner as you can.
In the UK alone, it's estimated that 42% of all marriages end in divorce. That's a pretty high stat. I'm sure in other countries it's even higher. So the institution of marriage seems to be failing. What's your take on that?
I've gone through a journey with it where I was married. I then became disillusioned with marriage. I think I rejected it and moved away from it, and I've fallen back in love with it again. So for me personally, I do value what marriage represents, which for me is a spiritual commitment to another person, and the values of connecting to someone, committing to someone. One of the ways that I define love is to support the psychological, emotional, and spiritual development of another person. And another way I define it is to see reality and to appreciate it, to see the person in front of you and to see them and to really value them and love them and then go on this journey of growth together. Now, can you do that without marriage? Absolutely. But there is something which I think is significant about marriage, where it changes things in a slight way, for me at least, where it feels like it's anchored in centuries and millennia of tradition. Is it for everyone? Of course not. Is it the only way? Of course not. Could I be happy without getting married? Absolutely.
So you're going to get married again, perhaps?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What do you think about polyamory?
The more the merrier. Are you asking Sean? This is for a friend.
I mean, it's a growing trend, especially in the US.
Yeah. Again, I think for me the part would be, and it's something that I looked at and considered. I think a huge part would be being honest with yourself about why you're drawn or considering polyamory. If it's something that feels deeply aligned and attuned to who you are and the values that you have and the life that you want to create, then it's something to be explored. What I found, though, even from speaking to others, is that sometimes it's trying to solve a problem which is based on a fear. So, for instance, you could be you could have had a number of experiences where you've been cheated on and there's been adultery, and then you want to reach this place where you don't want to experience that anymore. So you think, well, if I'm polyamorous and potentially, we're all with multiple partners, and then there's no infidelity. But that's not the case, of course, because often in a polyamorous relationship, you set, again, certain rules and conditions, even in terms of when do you inform the person, or what does it look like? Are they involved? Are they not? So infidelity still happens in polyamorous relationships. So that's just an example. But what I do believe is that there's no one set fixed way. And I think it's important that people are beginning to challenge either the nuclear model or the traditional way that relationships are set up, and then to find their own way of living that works for them. But I would say to be cautious with any changes that you make, because often there are unforeseen and unexpected consequences to the actions that we take. What are your thoughts on polyamory?
So we go on to the next question. I think there's no one set rule for everyone, and if it works for you, then great. I don't think polyamory would work for me. I think also there's a lot of misconception about polyamory, and I think from the stories I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but polyamory seems to be great for the guys as long as the woman doesn't fall in love with someone else. As soon as the woman, the female partner, falls in love with another man, it gets very dicey, and that seems to be a little bit one-sided. It's like okay if the man has several female partners, but not okay if the female has that many partners. So that's my amateur observation, because I'm not really deep into this community, but so. Kevin O'Leary said recently on the Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartley, he said, marriages can survive infidelity, but they can't survive, he roughly said this, marriages can survive infidelity, but they can't survive financial illiteracy or financial bankruptcy either. I.e., he was saying that the financial competence of a partnership is more important than the sexual fidelity of a married couple. I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, what arose for me is, what does the infidelity represent, and how does it impact the way that I presume we're talking about if it's in a heterosexual relationship, we're talking about the female looking at the male, and the financial literacy of a male. So how does the female's perception of the man change in this case with infidelity versus financial illiteracy? I'd imagine, as painful as it is, from an evolutionary perspective, the man has still attracted another female. I'm not saying that females find that attractive, but if you look at the subconscious subtext of it, that would be there. Financial literacy essentially would mean incompetence. You're unable to provide for yourself and for your partner. And again, from an evolutionary perspective, you can't have much more of a rejection and resistance to someone on a basic level than that. They can't provide, they can't protect. And so the feminine in that aspect would be completely unsafe.
This sort of leads nicely into this conversation about the masculine and the feminine in the modern day age. On that topic, the increase of what is known as trad husbands, the concept of a trad husband is a husband who takes on more domestic chores, more doing housework, particularly since the pandemic, that's growing in popularity. Do you think, and this may be controversial, do you think that will unbalance a traditional relationship or marriage? Is that a successful recipe for modern day marriage, where the man takes on more of what was considered to be more of the female sort of housework? And what's your thought on that? If it gets too controversial, cut it out. I can see my heart like, oh crap, we're going there. basically what I'm trying to say is it okay for a man to be a husband, to be the sort of house husband? Is it still acceptable? Because it's a growing trend, but I've seen here that it kind of upsets the masculine and feminine balance within a relationship or marriage, and that can lead to other difficulties.
Yeah. Well, answering your question directly, because it's more of a societal issue. I'll deal with the individual and psychological.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important parts in a relationship is to look at the dynamic of the masculine and the feminine. And within yourself, to look at your own relationship between the masculine and the feminine. And we're not talking about biological sex here. We're talking about energetic force. And so we all have this yin and yang, this blend of masculine and feminine. And one way of conceptualizing the masculine is that it is around structure, decision, protection, provision. It's grounded. There's stability. We often associate it with, logic or purpose. And then we have the feminine, which is this, beautiful force of nurture, care, creativity, intuition, the much more loving force. You could think of it if the masculine is the river bank, then the feminine is the river flow. And so they complement one another.
And without the bank, there is no river.
Absolutely. Yeah. And without the river, there is no river. We'll stick with your.
That's right. It's so wise.
Thank you. And so I recognized within myself that in my relationship, I had moved away from my own masculinity in that I didn't have structure. I didn't have an internal structure. I didn't have boundaries. I was not in a way leading, even being a leader in my own life in terms and being grounded and stable and providing direction and being honest and being direct in that honesty.
That's right. You're a bit of a wimbo.
It really was.
I'm so glad Aria's back.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
But so you're saying those are the sort of more traditional masculine qualities of a partner, and if a man doesn't, fill those shoes, if you like, then he will subconsciously lose the respect of his female partner,
and lose the connection if she is, or what will happen is that the female will then begin to move into her masculine in order to create that equilibrium. So there will always be the force of trying to find an actual balance. Now, if that balance moves in such a way that it's workable, then you'll find out it's workable. But what I've seen a lot of the time happen is the female moves into her masculine. She then is pulled away from, she's having to provide the protection. And when you provide the protection, you're also not in the same space to provide the love and the care for yourself or for others. And so that's moving her into a different place, which isn't where on a subconscious deep level she would want to be. And the same for the man. And so part of it is understanding. That's why it's the self-awareness, it's the journey, because the quickest way you can address that or redress that is by changing your own actions from a place of awareness and insight. Now, I also in my marriage thought that I thought my mistake was that I'd become too feminine, that my kindness was taken advantage of, that my care was used or abused. But that wasn't the case. What I came to a few years later was the absence of the masculine, not the presence of the feminine. So for men, it's important for us also to lean into our connection with the feminine, because we're often brought up with this cultural narrative that boys don't cry. Whenever I grew up, and I'm sure with you, it was Arnie, Stallone. The ideas I had of masculinity was one, very physical, but it was also being feeling like you were just untouchable and that you didn't express emotion. And even, whenever I work with men who cry, they'll often say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. They're sorry for crying, for feeling their emotion, for showing their emotion, because it's on such a deep level. It's seen as either weakness or vulnerability, which is seen as weakness. And so I think the journey, particularly for men, would be to absolutely explore your masculinity in its healthiest form, in its most freeing, loving form, as well as your femininity. And being clear, though, about what, because in its healthy form, the masculine is protection. In its wounded form, it's control and domination. You know, the same with the feminine. In its healthy form, it's nurture and love. In its wounded form, it's over-sacrifice and a lack of boundaries.
Beautifully said. You talk about crying. Rachel Reeves shed a tear in the Commons a few weeks ago, and the bond markets went crazy because it was a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Because obviously she'd been through a rough time, probably didn't sleep much that night. Everyone's attacking her. And I think really that sort of sums up how we still think about leadership and strength, right? If you cry, there's a problem. So it was just quite an interesting reflection on, you know, modern day society still views crying or vulnerability as a weakness.
Yeah. And I understand that, and I'm a pragmatic individual, and I work with CEOs and C-suite execs and professionals, and so take into consideration their context. Understand that during a boardroom meeting, you might not want to bring out the waterworks, but I think it's creating a space in your own personal life with the people who you feel safe with, and to have that love and trust and respect with, and going beyond the limitations of the ideas of what it means to be a man or a woman.
And you coach a lot of female execs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a different approach for coaching female executives?
That's a brilliant question. I love working with both. Like, it's fascinating. A lot of the time, the females are even more attuned, more aware of their emotion, but they've often had to shut it down even more because of the environment, and they're often hugely successful in their area. It's always just looking at the part that we're rejecting, and I think that can often be different, and leaning into the part where we're judging. And I think that can be the same, but it can often be very different for men as well. And I love working with men because they often move from a place where they start in their head and they move into their heart, and that can impact everything. From starting off in terms of having an idea of what's driving you and what you want to achieve, and often it's quite financially motivated, and it can be either in terms of turnover, in terms of an exit or a sale. And then seeing that transformation where they move away from the outcome to the process, to first of all reaching a place of even greater security and groundedness within themselves, and then seeing how that impacts what they want to create. Often they have like more energy, more motivation, more commitment, more compassion, because it doesn't become about the outcome anymore. It becomes about the process of what they're creating and why they're creating it, and it's then building something which is often impactful, or it's more about quality than it is about quantity, and it's about creating something that they love and that other people love, and through that path, often they're even more successful because they're moving from a different place.
Do you think that female leaders are as good as, or can be better than traditional male leaders? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Can one person be a better leader than another? Absolutely. But I think the lens for me wouldn't be gender. It'd be looking at the qualities that they bring. Yeah.
So going back to the gender roles, or modulating your masculine and feminine, would it be fair to say that female executives are basically having to kind of suppress their feminine to work in a male-dominated or male system, and therefore they're not giving enough attention to their feminine when they go back home? Did you find that as a common theme with your executives?
That is a dynamic that can definitely play out, where if you spend 8, 10, 12, 16 hours in an environment, then absolutely it can begin to have an impact in how you relate. But I'd say the biggest impact, though, in the relationship would be the relationship. So it's much more about how that relationship has been developed in the way that it's grown. And for the man to step up in that place too, and identify if there are any insecurities which are developing, or is the person in a place where they feel intimidated by or threatened by a powerful woman. Because the approach I take, it's never about diminishing anyone's power. It's always about encouraging it. And light brings more light, but it's identifying if you feel an insecurity to explore that, because that's within you and there's healing there, which is required.
What advice would you give to male executives or leaders? There aren't that many male leaders right now who embody the sort of feminine as well. I mean, can you think of any that sort of do that well? I mean, we have these crazy political leaders in the US who is almost like on hyper masculine. Are there any leaders that come to mind that you think embody the masculine and the feminine?
Well, part of the feminine is also creativity, innovation, that ability to grow, evolve, adapt. And so I think we bring feminine qualities in different ways. For me, I'm not in the business of ever giving advice. I think it always goes back to the inner work and just encouraging anyone to look inward. Right. Insight comes from the in and the prefix of turning inwards. So for me, that's where the growth will happen. And you might not even know where it will take you, but it's recognizing, are you feeling stress or pressure or anxiety or emptiness or a sense of disconnection or a void or hopelessness, or where are the parts to look at that and to begin to explore it? Because actually that part, it will be and look like your greatest source of suffering, but it will become your greatest source of strength. You have to go through that in order to grow.
What kind of techniques do you take people through to do that inner work?
So I trained as a clinical psychologist, and that's a huge part is based on cognitive theory and behaviorism. And now there's third wave therapies, mindfulness-based therapies. I then moved back to look at where they came from, because the discipline of psychology grew out of philosophy. So if you look at cognitive theory, that came from Stoic philosophy. If you look at mindfulness-based approaches like ACT or DBT, that grew out of Buddhist traditions, and even echoes back to Hindu practices as well. And so it's this mixture of Buddhist philosophy, Stoic philosophy, and then blending that with modern science.
You talk about tuning in and going in. What's your own spiritual practice or intuitive practice that you kind of foster or do every day?
Rather than a particular practice throughout the day, my task is to be present. And so being aware whenever my mind is pulling me into my head and then coming back. So there was a fascinating study at Harvard that showed that 46.9% of the time, on average, nearly half the time, our mind is somewhere else as to where we are or what we're doing. So nearly half the time we're daydreaming. And that is a wonderful cognitive tool in terms of your imagination and creativity, but it comes at an emotional cost and it comes at a relationship cost too. So for me, it's continually coming back to what I'm doing, and the means being itself. It's not about an end. If you're walking, to walk. If you're eating, to eat. When you're working, work. If you want to daydream, then daydream. But
you can't do all those things at once. You can't multitask.
Essentially, multitasking is a myth. You can multitask in terms of you can walk and you can talk. You can do the ironing and you can be thinking about something else. But your mind can really only ever hold one conscious thought at a time. So what you're actually doing is you're jumping from thought to thought to thought in different areas. And again, that comes at a cost, because in order to come back to your original thought and to reach that place of flow, it takes time. So it's a very inefficient way of going about life.
Have you had any mystical or peak experiences that have changed your view on the world or changed your life?
Certainly, and I'd say there's been parts through nature, parts through human connection, parts through introspection and reflection, and then parts through plant medicine as well.
What kind of medicine did you do?
So from mushroom and psilocybin to iboga, which is a tradition from Africa. And that probably was the most powerful one in terms of experiencing that there is this plane which...
Maybe you want to just start again.
Yeah. So the most, and the most question again.
Tell us a bit about.
Yeah.
Tell us about your plant medicine experiences.
Well, that would be from mushrooms and psilocybin to a plant medicine called iboga, and the core of the experience was the very visceral feeling that we are all connected, and that there is one source, and that source is pure love, and it's absolute, and coming to this insight that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we are here to have that experience. And I think the more we can connect to that path, that the meaning of life for me is to experience life. Like, we're here on this planet, which is spinning around a star millions of miles away. You know, you could fit, I think, 1.3 billion Earths in the star. And there are billions of stars in this galaxy and trillions of galaxies. Like, it's just mind-blowing. And we're here for this splice of humanity.
And the latest research, or one of the theories, suggests that we're actually in a black hole. This particular universe is in its own black hole, and of course there are gazillion black holes out there. So it's beyond human comprehension almost. It's almost infinite. To all intents and purposes, it's infinite. So when you go into these psychedelic journeys, you kind of touch the infinite and lose, the sort of ego dissolution.
Yeah,
it's very important. Would you recommend plant medicine to your clients?
So I'm not in the business of giving advice or recommendations. So my task whenever I'm coaching is just to share truthfully whatever arises intuitively for me, and it's then their journey and their exploration, because there'll be different modalities which are appropriate for different people at different times. But what I found through the work that we've done, they've often coincided that with psychedelic and plant-based journeys, and then we've integrated that into the work that we do as well.
Right. And your training involves physical training as well. It's not just psychological training. Are you coaching them on
the coaching that I do? I used to work more in that aspect, particularly whenever I was working with creative artists, but now it's purely psychologically based. Yeah,
because you're quite a vigorous person. You're a big guy.
Hybrid vigor.
Just give us a quick, what's your workout routine?
I think you're gonna say quick bicep flex. I was like, Sean,
quick, let's have a look at those guns.
Well, as you know, I actually had an injury in January, so I'm recovering from that.
So this is like you, at a low level.
Yeah, I've got to pick it up.
Because just for those of you listening, we actually went to Mongolia Aria came on our horseback riding safari, and at the end of it, we all went into the lake, and Aria got out, and he was like this sort of very ripped. I mean, you were incredibly ripped back then, and much to the chagrin of the men in the group. So, but you put a lot of importance on physical health and fitness.
They're so interlinked, and what I recognize is that the most powerful impact I can have on my mind is to be connected to my body.
Yeah,
and so absolutely.
In what sense? More than just like the physicality of it, like embodiment of your essence.
Yeah, exactly. On multiple levels. One, so the reason I train is because it brings a sense of peace into my life, and it's a way for me to reconnect. It's a way for me, when I train, for me to even connect to my body and to drop out of my head really and into my body.
Yeah.
And so there's a sense of peace, and there's like a reset that happens. So it's not, again, when I was in my early 20s, it was about aesthetics or about look, and now it's about feel. It's about feeling grounded, even feeling strong, feeling connected to myself. And it's an act of self-love. I think, a huge amount of work that I do is also looking at the ways that other people have either placed another person or placed work at their center. And time for them has become squeezed out, where they can be doing hours for a company or a firm or what they're developing, but then they get lost and their health begins to suffer along the way. And it's looking at the blocks to that. What led us to a place that your mind believes that you're not worthy of 45 minutes a day to train? What's led us to a point where your mind believes that you don't have time to sit down and have a nourishing meal? You almost don't deserve it. Something else is more important. Let's look at that.
Yeah, again, going back to Stephen Bartlett, he gave this great talk recently. He said, as a CEO, his number one job is really to be in his peak condition, like physically, mentally, and in his soul, to be the most effective leader. But we often see being a CEO as like, I can, grind from dawn till dusk and make sure everything is done, and then our energy drops off, our intuition drops off, and actually, you're not being the best CEO.
Completely. And I think we confuse maximal with optimal. Maximal would be the maximum output and the maximum amount of time dedicated, or the maximum amount of effort. Optimal flows. If you're driving around a racetrack in a car, you don't want your foot on the pedal, on the accelerator the whole time. That's maximal, but it's not optimal. There'll be times where you take it off, where you drop a gear. There'll be other times whenever you slam it down, other times where you're using, the brake, you're feeling the road. So there's a lot more nuance and sensitivity and connection to your environment, where you're continually feeling and dancing and loving yourself, taking care of yourself involves that. And like you said, the way I view it is actually they're not working against each other. If you ask someone, if you were in your peak mental state, emotional state, you're feeling rested, you're feeling strong, you are moving from a place of freedom where you're giving out of love rather than chasing out of fear, what change could you impact?
Absolutely. Why do you think so many men are afraid of emotional depth and doing this kind of work? And how do we help shift this collectively?
A huge part, I think, will go back to that idea of emotion and emotional expression being weakness. And as a man, it's probably one of the biggest insults you could give a man, really, if he was called either physically weak or emotionally weak or psychologically weak. Like, it goes against the evolutionary idea of the masculine as being strong, being a protector, being a provider. And another part is that the mind is driven by essentially three principles. It wants to pursue pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. And we have human experience, and we live in a world of, or by the law of polarity, where if there is hope, there is despair. If there is joy, there is sorrow. And we're here bringing spiritual to experience all of it. But the mind will begin to dislike different parts of our human experience. So often the mind in general, but particularly the masculine frame to mind, will dislike sadness. It doesn't like the feeling of sadness. And so what we dislike, we'll try and reject. But what we reject and what we resist will persist. So we often think that we're avoiding feeling these emotions or these feelings, but actually they're just beginning to build. And then eventually they often then end up erupting in different moments.
We're just coming to the lot because you've only got, 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Is that okay? We're just going to do one more question and then just some final rapid fire stuff, just quick answers. So for the couples who are having difficulty in their relationships, as someone who's been through a divorce, or what advice would you have to give them?
Part of it is seeing that relationships are a ground in which the parts of you that need to be healed will be revealed. And so rather than viewing the challenge or the difficulties, meaning there's something wrong with the relationship, view it as it's the relationship showing you where both of you need to turn your attention. And so you will always be going through different challenges at different times. And so then it's about leaning into, and the hardest part, but the most powerful part, is leaning into as a team. Often we get caught in this combative, oppositional, where there's me and there's you, and we're fighting against each other. Let's say, for instance, it's the other person's anger or the other person's insecurity. Rather than being combative, let's make that the third party and say, okay, there's me and you, and there's anger here, or there's your anger over here, or there's me and you, and there's this insecurity, there's this controlling behavior, or there's this clinging behavior. Let's look at it together, and how together can we work together to understand what this is meant to be teaching us and to grow through it, to reach a place where we're both taking responsibility, but we understand that support and growth is so powerful when you do it relationally and with a couple, but it does require both people to be open to it.
It kind of relates nicely to a beautiful quote by Simone Weil: "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." What does she mean by that?
I see you've read my newsletter.
That's right. Thank you for giving me that quote.
So I think our attention, I think, is one of the most valuable things that we have. And so often in a relationship, really all we want, or all the other person wants, is to be seen. And through being seen, to be valued. And often being valued means being heard and feeling understood. And so we can often get caught up in so many other parts of a relationship, but we overlook the simplest part, which is just, are you being seen? Are you truly there with your present and your partner?
That's beautiful. Thank you. Right, we're just getting to the end, so we're just going to do a few rapid fire questions. One daily practice that grounds you.
Look up.
Look up.
Look up. I love looking at the sky. So I look at the sky, and it just creates a sense of perspective, and it just creates a sense of expansion.
What's a book or a teacher or thought leader who's had the greatest impact on you and your health?
Anthony DeMello. I'd really encourage other people to look into his book. There's one called Awareness.
Beautiful. What do you wish more people knew about healing and positivity?
Healing isn't about returning to the version of you before the event or the circumstances happened. It's about integrating and returning to the love within yourself. And so it's a part of growth and a part of evolution.
If you could whisper one truth into the heart of every listener right now, what would it be?
All is well, and all will be well.
Beautiful. One final question. What's something about yourself that no one out there knows? It's okay. This is a safe container.
What's something? Oh my goodness. No, I don't know. I'll put it this way. Jordan Peterson has a quote which I like. And it speaks to also the parts of masculinity and what it means. A good man is not a harmless man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control.
That's a great quote to end. Thank you so much, Aria. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Sean.
Such a great pleasure.
Great to see you.
Can't wait to do more with you and go into more adventures.
Can't wait. Love you.
All right, love you, man.